In today's episode, we are joined by Shane McGovern of the Des Moines, Iowa store, who is an absolute food preparation guru.
I guess it's kind of my way to tell people I appreciate them, where you don't come out and say, hey man, I love you, and give them a big hug. I'd rather cook some baby back ribs for you.
He's been doing this his whole life, from picking tomatoes and beans in the garden with his grandparents to showing his kids how to do it nowadays and have them rob all of the stuff that he's been growing that's hanging out in his basement.
Not unlike our hunting traditions or our fishing traditions or any other family tradition. I want my girls to know that if they need to, they can grow their own food.
So we give some great tips on food preparation, canning, field to table stuff, and we even got some great rib tips in there if you end up having a friendly rib competition.
Are you taking notes?
I'm going to come back to this. Don't worry about that. Stick around and check this one out. Would you mind introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about your role at SCHEELS?
Yeah. Hi, friends. My name is Shane McGovern. I've been working for SCHEELS since 1999. So it's been a blessing and a learning adventure. I've been doing this, like I said, for 25 years. And seems like every year I learn something new or exciting, have the opportunity to help with our university system. I help with our barbecue and food prep university, get to help our new associates make different barbecue stuff and do a lot of grunt work behind the scenes after everybody's gone and before everybody starts. We're kind of an old fashioned company, as you guys well know. So we get up early and we work hard and go to bed late. So work hard, play hard mentality.
There we go. Exactly. So yeah, Shane definitely does a lot of stuff for us. Can you just talk to us a little bit about like the importance of food preparation and what really got you into it and what gets you excited about all of that stuff?
Well, I think that's a good question because growing up, I actually kind of distasted or didn't really enjoy the garden because it was one of my chores. So when I was a kid, I'd spend a week with each one of my grandparents, each set, and they lived in Dubuque and Galena, Iowa, and they both had big gardens. And so they would go down to the garden in the morning and they would pick the garden. They'd have a little breakfast, go down to the garden in the morning, pick the garden, come back to the house about 10:30, have snacks, which is usually like crackers, summer sausage, that stuff, German, Irish stuff, and then wait until the afternoon and go back down to the garden and pick. And I remember I watched my grandmas and my parents can and do all that stuff. And it was weird because for a long time I was kind of shooed out of the kitchen when it came to anything like that. I suppose pressure canners, boiling water, that stuff. And my grandmas didn't know what to think about a young man that wanted to cook, right? So I learned at a young age when I made good food that people really appreciated it. And I'm one of those manly men, ex-military, the whole 9 yards. So I guess it's kind of my way to tell people I appreciate them, where you don't come out and say, hey, man, I love you, and give them a big hug. I'd rather cook some baby back ribs for you or some wild mushrooms that I've foraged for or that my family and I've foraged for them. Anything that you get from me, and I don't know if you guys probably haven't got to try some stuff, but some of the other folks up there have, I can guarantee it's made with child labor too. Out of my house is made with child labor, whether they want to or not. I try not to push them, but I say, hey, if you wanted to, you could come down and help your dad make applesauce tonight. And we have a little canning kitchen in our basement. And so last night I had my daughter Lorraine down there, and she had the little apple peelers that we sell going. Mm-hmm. Like, Dad, I'd like to make a pie too. So while we were making applesauce, we made an apple pie too for dinner that night. So it's always been around me, the kind of garden to table thing, and the field to table thing's been around me, but more so now than ever. And I tell you what, it's more of a family thing than anything. We're always looking for something to forage or something new to make, or we'll drive past a little orchard or whatever. We'll stop by and say hi, and you'd be surprised how many times those people will say, yeah, go ahead, pick whatever you want. And we take them back stuff that we make, and they're like, you come back and you pick whatever you want.
As long as you're coming back with pies.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you can make baby back ribs for me anytime. But, you mentioned like the whole family aspect of it, and that's really refreshing. A lot of people, when it comes to like food prep, will talk about, field to table, and then, being prepared and, eating what you have grown or what you have harvested. But it's really cool to talk about it as a way to be really good at like a family bonding experience and sort of like passing on the tradition per se.
Yeah, not unlike our hunting traditions or our fishing traditions or any other family tradition. I want my girls to know that if they need to, they can grow their own food. So, and that's not like a prepper thing, although I like to be prepared, not necessarily a prepper, because people think you're out there in Goo Goo land when you start talking about that.
Yeah, but some zombie stuff.
Yeah, we absolutely love, and I absolutely love taking. We load up the truck when we go to Michiana, which is where my wife's uncle lives, for Christmas. It's just beautiful there, and I always put a cooler full of stuff in there, gifts for Aunt Kathy and Gary and Keith and Brittany, their family. And I always leave it in the truck. I'll pull some stuff out in the middle, but I always leave it in the truck till kind of the end of opening presents. And then they're like, "Hey, did you bring anything?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I brought some stuff. I left it in the truck." so I bring pickles and jellies and jams and some walleye and some venison sausage and jerky and all that stuff. What, 3 years ago, we were up there in the fall, and I had marinated some venison loin. The recipe's on our What's Cooking at SCHEELS. But I had marinated, and we hadn't got to it yet, and the whole family was out around the campfire. It was a little cool. Everybody had sweatshirts on, and I just stripped out that venison loin and started putting it on hot dog deals. I was surprised, like the kids absolutely killed it. Like they had so much fun grilling their own meat over the campfire and then eating it. It was a huge hit. So now every time that we go there, we have to do that, no matter the time of year. So.
Oh, I gotta try that now. That sounds incredible.
It's a great way to get kids to actually like eat things, when they have a little bit of skin in the game. It's like, I've noticed that with my 4-year-old daughter. Like, it is just an absolute nightmare to get her to eat at dinner. Like she'll get off the chair and then she'll run around. I gotta go potty. I gotta go feed the dog. I gotta go put away my tiara. There's just anything to not sit at the table. But if like my wife's making something like homemade beef stew and like she has to cook carrots or like, like use her little plastic chopper to do things, and it actually like helped create it, she'll sit down and she'll eat that whole thing. It's just wild, the difference in that.
Yeah, so, my kids, Lorraine's 10 and Claire's 7, and they've both been using knives since they were 4 or 5. I mean, we let them use real knives and stuff. And it's my dad, God bless his soul. He's still around, but he was like, "I can't believe you're letting her use a knife like that." And I'm like, "She'll be okay. That's how we learn, right?" Like, I'm here
yeah. Hey, I still have my fingers.
Say, you learn or you don't learn.
I've only had one SU. Yeah. but the kids have a ball with all that stuff. And what they love more than anything is Christmas time and stuff like that. Like I talked about giving the gifts of what we foraged for or what we grew and what we harvested. And they really love that. They love taking jars of jelly to school. And I told them they can't say they made it unless they help. So they help at least a little bit with everything. I don't try to burn them out, because I remember as a kid for a long time just going, hated the garden, picking strawberries, bending over all morning picking strawberries. And but now I find it very peaceful.
Yeah. So. Love it. Hey, okay, question for you. So thinking back to like your times in the garden with your grandparents versus today, what is one product that you just think, God, I'm so glad that got invented?
God, I'm trying to think. Well, my grandparents never had a pressure juicer. It's just a juicer you put on the stove, and you can put berries or cherries or whatever. Recently, we've been doing cherry jam. I made 24 half pints of cherry jam the last 3 nights and this morning. And that juicer, you literally I put 6 gallons throughout a couple hours in the top of it. And it's like a pressure juicer, and the steam pressurizes it almost like a still, and it pushes all the juice out. And I have a little drawer next to the stove. I just pull the drawer out, stick a towel in there, and stick a gallon jar in there, and run the hose to the jar. I filled with 6 gallons of cherries we picked from somebody we stopped by and just said, "Hey, love your orchard," And It made 3 gallons of cherry juice, and I'm 1.5 gallons through the cherry juice, and I think I'm at 27 half pints
Holy
of
cow.
jelly.
Wow.
So
If you remember for Christmas, Mike, Solomon, and Ashley hopefully can make the list.
Yeah. Cherry will do
I
it.
know make something work out. You know,
yeah.
I was up there not too long ago, and I sent some little care packages to a couple people up.
Nice.
I sent Jeff a book, and I sent JP from Texas, who was up there with me looking at the food prep line. I sent him some jellies and jams. So
Nice.
I like doing that stuff.
Yeah.
I like bringing stuff up too. So if we do some videos, what's cooking or whatever, I usually prep half of it here and prep the rest in. So.
Okay.
I'll have to make something happen.
What I think is so neat, though, is like this is such a testament to like our experts. Like he lives and breathes this, you know, so what great advice he can give.
This is who you want to talk
Yeah.
to when you have questions about that stuff.
Yeah, but I love that. That's,
And I'm trying to pull others into the fold. You know what I mean? So we grind and make sausage and stuff here in the store, and we'll do it for a training meeting one night. And then the next week or 2 weeks from then, we'll pull the sausage out that they make, and we'll use 2 or 3 of our different cooking devices and cook on there. So
Awesome.
It becomes pretty cool. Maybe pull out a sous vide, which most of them don't know what it is. Vacuum seal some Italian sausage or some brats or something, and put it in there. Recently, if you want a home run, our SCHEELS Philly steak brats, the packaging that we sell. I was in Tulsa helping with Tulsa's opening, and with their crew there, I made the pineapple brats and the Philly brats. I had never made them before, and I had like 40 people there making brats with us. I had a little time, 2.5 hours. They called me and told me it was the best brats they ever had, the Philly steak ones. So I made 20 pounds of them, and I took them down to the lake, and I cooked them for my 2 old buddies, Jerry and Vern. Vern's like another father to me, and they're usually like very judgmental when it comes to sausage or anything like
They can't
that.
let you have it easy.
Right? Well, they haven't started talking about it. Recently, we had that stuff on sale, and each one of those guys bought enough to make 20 pounds of those Philly brats. So if you want like at Ace in the Hole, you can buy pork butts for $1.79. Trim them up, buy 3 of those. It's about 20 pounds. You know, they run 6 to 8 pounds. Just run it through the grinder with that, and you don't even have to make brats. My buddy Vern's just been making patties and grilling the patties up with it. It's amazing. Whoever did that, Jeff or Darren, it's a home run, that Philly steak brat recipe bag.
That sounds so good.
so these are the kits. Is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
Like it's a sausage kit, jerky kit.
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely, Ashley.
So what would be the whole setup that someone would need to get started? You mentioned a meat grinder.
Yeah, well, a lot of people when they just get started start off with just a meat grinder. I always suggest buying, the top end of what you can afford, because buy once, cry once. And the lower end grinders, we started out with a KitchenAid mixer in my house. And my wife got kind of mad because it smelled like it was going to burn up, that kind of electric fire smell. And she's like, we can't grind meat with my mixer anymore. And we were just like processing one deer, right? And so I bought a little bit bigger one, and that one was okay. But now I'm up to a 3/4 horse, and I think if you can get it all metal, 1/2 horse or 3/4 horse from LEM or one of the other companies. I like LEM. That's what we sell most of. We sell a couple other brands. But you can always get parts for an LEM if you need parts. Although, knock on wood, I haven't needed any parts for my LEM grinders yet. But so the grinder's the main thing, and you can just grind, and you can stuff with a grinder, but it just doesn't work real well. Really, what you need is a grinder, a meat mixer, and a stuffer. In order to make really good sausage, you need a meat mixer, which mixes the meat to a point where it's really nice and tacky. And that's where you extract the protein in the meat. And it really makes that meat more of one continuous piece versus crumbly when you cook it. So, and so therefore it makes it really tough to push back through the grinder once you mix it properly. So you almost have to have a stuffer to push it through there. But, my last locker bill was 14 years ago. I think I paid $700-800 at the locker. So in 1 year, I could buy 2 of those things with the same price I paid for the locker.
Yeah.
And the next year, I could buy all the vac seal bags, casings, mixtures, and the other one, and be good to go, and a vacuum sealer. So in 2 years of locker bills for me, I could buy everything I need to process at home.
That is exactly why I started getting into food prep stuff too. Cause like, I mean, I didn't get into food prep. Well, I kind of did for the same reason that you did, but like grew up in the garden, like chores, picking stuff out of the garden. Not my favorite thing to do on a hot summer day when I'm like 12 years old. I'd rather be doing probably anything else, but did that. So like, that was kind of my introduction to like the garden and the fruits and that type of thing kind of side of things. But then as I got more into hunting, I was like, oh yeah, all right, let's eat the meat. Let's like utilize the harvest, right? So you take it to a locker because that's all that anybody in my family ever did. Because I didn't grow up in a huge hunting family. So it was like, okay, well, you got a deer, take it to the locker. Let's have somebody process it, right? Mm-hmm. So my introduction to the food prep side came from my father-in-law, who was like, yeah, I do all that stuff. So like when me and my fiance started dating, I got to talking with him and he's like, yeah, just like bring your deer here and we'll do it. I was like, what do you mean we'll do it? Like you got to take it to a locker. What do you mean? It's like, yeah, just bring it. We'll string it up. I'll teach you the cuts of meat. I'll teach you how to cut it, how to process it, what goes where, what we're going to do with certain parts. I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. And then so that was probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And like you said, I've just slowly started accumulating a couple pieces, got a grinder, got a stuffer, got a sealer, and probably by the end of this year or next, I'll have just about everything I would ever need to process meat. And it's just saving up a little bit at a time and adding to the collection.
Yeah, you talk passionately about it. It's fun to bring somebody else along on that journey, right?
Yeah.
So Vern's 76 now and Jerry's 72, I think. And those guys have been critics, and we trade and all the stuff that we make, and then we learn from each other. And I don't keep a notebook, but I'm going to start. Brad Lockwood from Coolabuck was at the Barbecue University this year and talked about the importance of taking notes when you're making stuff so you can see what turns out and what doesn't. It's like jellies and jams, man. You can follow the recipe to a T sometimes, and sometimes it just doesn't set up, and I don't understand why. Grape jelly is like, seems to be the worst for me. I make all kinds of jellies and jams, but sometimes it just doesn't set up. And I've made food products, and I say instead of sausage, it's dog treats now, right? A little too salty. Maybe not.
Yeah. Just get passed down the line a little bit.
Through the years, I've made lots of dog treats for the neighbor's dog, my dog, or people at Shield's dog. So, but it's part of the learning process, and I try to pull somebody along every year if I can. So, especially our crew. I mean, a lot of them are interested in it, but it depends on where you're at in life. I mean, a 20-something-year-old kid probably doesn't have the money to buy all that stuff. But if you're in your 30s and starting a family and worried about where your food comes from, I mean, I think it's a pretty solid plan to at least keep some of your meals healthy, right?
Yeah. And I was going to ask you too, like, I don't know how much of I'm sure you do a lot of like the meat processing portion too. I don't know how many deer or elk or whatever type of meat you do, but like how long does that seem to last you? Like, do you only eat the stuff that you make for meat, or do you supplement it with other things? How long does a deer last? I guess you.
I love a ribeye.
There you go.
The venison, a lot of people don't understand. It's all about how you take care of it, right? Olivia, I was up there with Cam and Olivia doing some videoing for what's grilling or what's cooking at SCHEELS, and I brought up venison, and I told Olivia that I went through all this work that she was going to have to try it. Well, she hoarded a bunch of it and took it around to the office the next day. So I had people coming up, man, that venison was good that you made, line leaders and stuff at the Barbecue University. And I said, well, it's all trial and error, right? But I've come up with a system between watching podcasts and everything else where I wet age my venison. I have an extra fridge in the basement. I keep at 36.5 degrees, and I'll vacuum seal my venison loin and some of the other more choice cuts, and I'll actually wet age it. And I've learned that about 2 to 3 weeks is the perfect amount of time to wet age it in the freezer. And if the vacuum seal pops, well, then all bets are off. I'll probably throw that away almost every time. But it does add a really, like, it softens the meat and gives it just a little something extra. I mean, the beef you get from the store is all aged, so you probably have never eaten beef that hasn't been aged. So go ahead.
What's wet aged exactly?
Wet age is when you vacuum seal it. First of all, you make sure that the animal is clean, right? Like if you got to shoot an animal, the last thing you want to be doing is vacuum sealing any kind of meat and wet aging it that could have any contaminants on it, right? So like the outside back straps are usually a pretty good call for it. So I'll chop the outside back straps into about this big of chunks, and I'll put 2 of them in a quart vacuum seal pack, and I'll put that in the freezer, and they'll stay in the freezer. I like my stuff to sit in the freezer for a few months for safety reasons and other reasons. But and then I pull it out, and I just put it in the fridge. I switch it from the freezer to the fridge, and that fridge was at 36.5 degrees. And I have a FireBoard. Are you guys familiar with FireBoard? It's a way to monitor your grill. Well, I have a FireBoard I've been trying to kill for the last 6 years just to see. And I actually have that FireBoard. I don't have my cell phone in here, but I can pull it up and I can show you the temperature on that refrigerator and the temperature on that freezer. And it's an early warning system if the freezer dies, and it has actual minimum temperatures or maximum temperature set on it. So an alarm goes off on my phone if my freezer gets above.
Oh, nice.
If my freezer gets above 10 degrees and if my fridge gets above 40 degrees, an alarm goes off. Well, I have a 7 and a 10-year-old, and they like jerky and sticks. I can tell you that alarm's gone off more than you could imagine. It's a big upright freezer.
Sure.
Because they open the freezer door and don't get it all the way shut. And I call my wife. I'm here working at SCHEELS. I come down for my dinner break. I'm like, hey, was one of you guys in the freezer? Because I think we have a problem. Because the freezer's up to 12 degrees now.
Oh.
And so they go down and shut the door. But yeah, wet aging is the process of just vacuum sealing the meat and sticking it in. I mean, I'm no food safety expert, so I don't want to give anybody food safety advice. But what I can tell you is if you make sure it's at safe temperatures, what I do that period of time, 2 to 3 weeks, it makes unbelievable table fare. And mostly played around with elk, venison, some moose, stuff like that, all of it though. My friend Dave Albright is a developer, and he went out west on an elk hunt. He brought me back some elk back straps to wet age for him. And so I actually pulled them out. I cut them all up and all that stuff, vacuum sealed them, left them in my fridge for 2.5, 3 weeks. And then I put them in the freezer. And when he came over, I filled his cooler with it. So he's like, here, some for you.
That's awesome. You know, I wish we would have done this podcast maybe like 2 months ago, because we had a little bit of a freezer issue, because one of ours is a little bit older, and for some reason it doesn't seem to quite shut perfect. And we had some stuff like pretty much thaw out completely. And then my wife turned into like panic mode and then went to Amazon and bought one of those temperature sensors that'll like beep at you, you know, kind of like you're talking about with the FireBoard. But she went as cheap as possible, and that thing has went off like 5 or 6 or 10 times in the middle of the night. And I'll like wake up at 2, 3 a.m. and have to shut the thing off. Cause like, I don't want to like go to her phone and shut it off. It's like, I just like physically like turn the thing off. Like, yeah, I'm not dealing with you. And I have a FireBoard in my cupboard right now. It's like, man, I just need to hook that sucker up. That would have saved me a bunch of extra sleep.
Running nonstop for 7 years. And I'm big on multiple use things, dual use things. When it comes to the kitchen or the garden, you know, we compost underneath our kitchen sink. We have my wife's big into like organization, because we live in a small old brick house that we've remodeled, and it's just a little container with a pop lid. I think it was like originally like a juice container. So all the organic scraps go in there, and they go out back, and we have some compost barrels, and that stuff is amazing. You know, in the spring, I'll spread the compost that's all the way down over the top of the garden, and we'll turn it in, and it does a great job. So I've also found a way to recycle the raccoons and other things that might happen to fall prey to they got all my grapes this year. So I've been burying raccoons in between my tomato plants. And you know what? They eat the tomatoes. The tomatoes eat them. It's a whole circle of life thing. But you've seen more beautiful tomatoes in your life. I used to do it with fish, you know, the carcass from fish, walleyes and crappies and stuff. I'd always freeze them and then bring them home and put like a gallon of fish guts and carcasses below each one of my tomato plants. This year it was a little bit of fish guts and some raccoons.
Beautiful tomatoes. That's the
you know,
recipe.
if it ever comes down to an end of the world situation, I want you on my team, Shane. I really do.
I don't want to talk too much about that, because people will think we're conspiracy theorists or whatever.
Oh, no, it's we're just being prepared. And you know what? You are living off the land and making most of it. So love that. Love that about you.
I just want to go to his backyard party.
Yeah. Some little baby back ribs, a little marinated venison.
Oh, boy.
I like to cook. So think my wife and I are getting a name for ourselves for being those people where people just stop by to say, "Hey, what's going on?" And I'm like, "Sit down, I cook for you." Like my wife's grandma, she would, Martha would always set us down and, I cook for you, right? I cook for you. You sit down, I cook for you, right? So I kind of feel like that's who I am.
Yeah.
I feel like that's one of the best ways to show appreciation. We've had some contractors doing some work for us on different stuff, and I try my darndest to feed them whenever I get the opportunity. So I really do, because I can't tell you how much I appreciate, I love people, and what a great way to share that is with good food around the table. Mm-hmm. So some of my happiest times growing up were around the table with my family, Thanksgiving or Christmas or that stuff. And now when we have all those people around, I get done cooking. A lot of times I'll just go sit down and listen to the rumble behind me of happiness.
Yeah. So, food has a great way of bringing people together.
It does. Mm-hmm. Somebody's smelling something and they want a part of it.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I've heard about all you guys at the corporate office and when food's laying around up there.
It's like scavengers.
Yeah, we've got a little corner that's usually has something there.
Yeah, it's no baby back ribs, but
yeah, exactly. I'd like to switch gears a little bit. What sort of trends are you seeing in the food prep industry, or what sort of new items over the past couple of years have come about that has you really excited?
Has me excited that steam juicer had me pretty excited. Actually, somebody who doesn't do near as much as canning as I do says, "I can't believe you don't have one of these." So that steam juicer, the sous vide, I've just played with it a little bit. I know that's kind of an older trend, but people are continuing to play around with that. In COVID, there was a huge push into, garden to table, or farm to table, or forage to table. And I have an old canning book from my grandma. It must be from, I guess, late 40s, early 50s. And in it, there's a page that talks about your responsibility as a citizen of the United States. And it talks all about victory gardens. And it's one of the most inspirational pages I've ever seen in like a canning or cooking book. It just says, in times of plenty, it is your duty, if you're able-bodied, to preserve for your family and those without. And in times of need, then you can help, right? And I guess ever since I read that, it's been pretty profound. And I feel like COVID, everybody started realizing that they don't have to go to the grocery store for a lot of things. They can grow it on their own. I have the mother load in my basement. I have 800 jars in my basement, 400 of which are canned. Everything from tuna we caught, to smoked salmon, to on the protein side, all the way over to pickles and that stuff. So, and lots of jellies and crazy jams in between. I like mixing habaneros and chili pepper and that stuff in with jellies and jams. Mm-hmm. Something you can't buy at the grocery store.
Yeah, you're sitting on your retirement plan down there, huh?
I just am a busybody, so it keeps me busy. I can do it and still think. Mm-hmm. It's one of those mundane jobs like pulling weeds. I don't love pulling weeds, but it gives me think time. So, but trends, I think it's actually, we're trending a little out of that farm to table thing. During COVID, there was a huge push and all kinds of people got into it, but people are realizing how much work it is. And, time is something that we all don't have enough of. So you got to figure out where you're happiest. And if getting your hands in the dirt makes you happy, then get your hands in the dirt. And if you haven't tried it, try it. There's actually studies that say when you get your hands in the dirt, it releases serotonin, which is a happy endorphin. And just being outside, outdoors, hunting, fishing, that stuff. So I would encourage people to try it if they haven't yet. And there's groups in every community in the United States where you can befriend somebody who will be glad to mentor you into how to process deer or how to can or that stuff. I mean, it's some of that stuff gets to be kind of a dying thing. And when times are hard, that's something we need. We need to know that we all have the ability to grow hundreds of pounds of produce in our backyard, regardless of size. I have the tiniest backyard in the world, and we grow hundreds of pounds of produce in that little backyard. And I just have 4 foot worth of gardens all the way around the backyard.
Nice. Yeah. I believe that serotonin line 100% because I can tell you every time I'm in my deer stand versus when I'm in my office, I'm way happier in my deer stand.
Well, and even like along the lines of like the happiness thing you were talking about, people that hunt that haven't done like the field to table portion of things, like I feel like you said during COVID, that was a big boom because then they know where their meat's coming from, right? But then at the same time, once you get past the initial investment of things, you're saving money. You're enjoying the work that you're doing. You're physically working with your harvest that you can feel proud of, and you're eating it and you're reaping the benefits and sharing the benefits with other people too. So I think that's along the same lines of releasing those good endorphins too.
It's very rewarding.
I think when you reach out with a hand and you have a package of jerky or a package of sausage or a jar of jelly that you have played a role in, I mean, I watch my girls light up when they present that to somebody, and I try my best to let them do that too, right? Like to push them out. Like when it comes to handing that stuff out, like it makes me happy, it makes me proud, it makes me boastful, but I want them to feel that. So, and we felt that when I was growing up. My mom had us making jellies and jams with her, and then we didn't have a lot of money. But we always had good food, a roof over our heads, and clothes and that stuff. But I think my mom went out of the workplace and stayed home, and I think she canned and cooked more out of necessity to help the family budget out than she did out of, for enjoyment. I can and cook and hunt and process more for enjoyment than I do for necessity now. But I don't know. I just love it. It'll always be a part of my life, and hopefully always part of my daughter's life. I know the stuff that comes out of the garden is more nutritious than the stuff you buy in the grocery store. And my girls have really gotten into mushroom hunting lately.
Okay.
And so we're harvesting. We harvested morels in the spring, and then oyster mushrooms. We've found just piles of oyster mushrooms this year, and then chanterelles. And my wife made a beef stroganoff a couple weekends ago with chanterelle mushrooms. One of the finest dishes I've ever had in my life.
Love it.
Do you guys like mushrooms?
I was just going to say, I grew up hating mushrooms with a passion, but I don't know if it's just like they've been intermixed in things that I've had in the last, 3-4 years or so. But like, I've come to the point where I don't really mind them at all. Like, I wouldn't care if they're in or out of the dish, but I totally grew up hating them. Did not like them at all.
Yeah, I totally grew up hating them as well, and I still hate them today. But I can get down with the morels. When you pan fry them and then they don't really taste like mushrooms anymore.
I've never had morels.
It's more of a texture thing for me. It's just I can't do it. I know lots of people like them, and I don't have anything against that. You can have all my mushrooms.
You can get them to taste like bacon even.
Really?
I just need to try one.
Where are you at with the mushrooms?
I love mushrooms. Okay. I've bought that like multi-pack from Costco that it's like 6 different kinds of mushrooms. So good.
Oh yeah.
Actually, I went home and I had some mushrooms, but not the good ones. Like that would be phenomenal what your wife made.
Yeah, I tell you what, venison loin, for whatever reason, mushrooms and wild rice complement venison loin really, really well.
Okay.
So some sauteed mushrooms or really, really well. I don't know. It's weird. It's like the deer eat the mushrooms. We eat the deer and the mushrooms together.
Actually, yeah, that's a great segue because I was going to ask you too. Like, I just kind of got into like the food prep portion of things and like utilizing the harvest, but now I feel like I'm way behind on like knowing how to cook it. Like I just got a smoker for the first time and everything else had been like throw it on a grill and maybe when it looks done, it's done. But like I'm trying to dig in a little bit more to like cooking in general and just knowing what goes with what, how to prepare certain things. So I was going to ask you at some point what your recommendation would be for like just a nice basic meal that I could cook the family of like, what would you recommend that could be easy to start with?
Well, what are you going to cook for?
We actually pretty much solely eat venison for the most part. So I've got a lot of ground venison, a lot of steaks, a lot of roasts. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to do backstrap, which is a thing most people are familiar with, outside backstraps, I would start with, it starts from the moment the trigger's pulled and goes from there. The first thing I would do is make sure that we get that deer cooled down right away, and get the pluck out of it and get it cooled down right away. That'd be the number one thing I'd say. And then let's get it back. Let's get the hide off of it. Once you get it to wherever you're going, I don't like getting the hide off of it before I get it to wherever I'm going to process it, just to get the dirt stuff off of it. Get the hide off of it, get it cooled down good. And then let's start breaking it up into muscle groups, putting it into packaging. I prefer vacuum seal. It holds up better. You still have to be careful with it, or bang it in the freezer, the vacuum seal will pop. But vacuum seal it, and then, like I said, I'll pull it out, the venison loin, and I'll put it in the fridge. You really have to make sure the temperature stays 38 degrees or below, but I'll put that vacuum sealed venison in there frozen. I'll leave it in there for 2 weeks. So we always have something in there that's wet aging that I write a date with a Sharpie on it on when I put it in the fridge. And there has been a couple times where I forgot it. I don't want to tell you how old the oldest wet aged venison I fed my wife is, but she was completely shocked when I gave her the answer. I said, how long do you think I had that in the fridge downstairs? She goes, do I want to know?
Yeah, what she doesn't know doesn't hurt, right?
But I would do the venison loin, and I would do a simple marinade, the whole pineapple juice, like a little can of that, soy sauce. It's kind of a teriyaki marinade.
Okay.
Soy sauce, a quarter cup of that, a tablespoon of minced garlic, and some Lowry seasoning salt, or your favorite salt, spice, and just wrap that up and put it in the fridge overnight. And I would either cook that on a cast iron skillet, or a flat top, or a grill. But the goal is to cook the outside of it kind of hard and fast, and it'll almost caramelize. If you're doing a cast iron skillet, throw a little butter on there, and you want that butterfly or that chunk of loin to just, when it hits it, right, it'll smoke a little bit. So hopefully you have a fan over your stove. Luckily I do. Then while you're doing that venison in the rice cooker, I usually have some wild rice. I barter for homemade salsa for wild rice. I have a friend that goes up and hunts with the indigenous people up north, and he brings me back wild rice, and I supply him with salsa throughout the summer, fresh salsa.
There you go.
And it works out pretty good for me. I usually get about a gallon of wild rice, and he usually gets about 3 gallons of salsa. But that, and then this time of year, if you could find hen of the woods or hen of the woods, which are out now, sometimes chanterelles, oyster mushrooms, I would probably chop some of those up and saute them in some butter, maybe make a brown sauce with the drippings from the venison, put that on there, give it a little coat of that, the wild rice. And then depending on where you're at in the year, I'm a seasonal eater. So if it's now this time of year, you're talking squash, pumpkin. My body, my stomach desires things that are in season. Apples, maybe saute some apples with some sugar and make some candied apples or whatever with it. So that's probably what I would do.
That's good. I might be trying that tonight. Actually, I got to marinate it first. Maybe tomorrow. I gotta get the marinade in the fridge. That's great. I love it.
I really appreciated that you talked about that seasonal eating, because that is really like how we were designed.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense.
Like those tubers and those hardier vegetables in the winter, and then the greens when they come up in the spring. Yeah.
Got to bulk up for the winter.
The little one last night was talking about some berries she found at school. I said, you don't eat berries unless Dad looks at them first, right? Because they're so used to going through the timber in the backyard. I mean, they had kids over the other day. They're picking cherry tomatoes. Oh, go ahead, eat them. They're fine. Don't you need to wash them? She says, nope, I just rub them off on my pants like this. Dad says that's good.
Yeah, builds up the immune system.
And they're picking peppers right off the pepper plants. I couldn't believe it. Here's these four little kids, 10 and under in my backyard, and just pilfer in the garden. Which
that's great. Yeah.
I'd ask for Doritos or candy bar. My dad'd be like, there's a whole garden full of snacks back there. Go back and help yourself.
Oh,
that's great.
I love it. So, all right, Shane, you strike me as a guy that could make a mean rack of ribs. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have this competition coming up. So, and I'll talk about it now because, excuse me, it's this weekend, but we're not going to release this podcast like immediately. So I want all of your super secret tips and tricks to win this friend barbecue competition. So basically I'll set the stage. There's like 10 groups. Everybody brings their own pellet grill, and you just best ribs win. We got like tickets for people's choice, and then there's like 3 people that are judges. And it's not necessarily presentation based. It doesn't have to be perfect competition, like perfect consistency. It kind of leans a little more towards like, if it's softer, a little more fall off the bone, you're not losing any points for that. Can you give me some tips and tricks to win this competition?
Well, it's funny because Uncle Gary from Michiana was actually at our place 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and I made some ribs. And he called me. He brought me salmon, and I sent him with some venison. So from Michiana up on Lake Michigan. So he brought me a cooler full of salmon, and I fed him the whole time, him and Kathy, while they were there. And I made ribs. And he said, I don't want your head to get bigger or anything, but those are the best ribs I ever have. And he's presented the same situation where I have a friend's barbecue contest, and I guarantee you if I cook those ribs, I'll win. And I said, well, here's the deal, Gary. People like ribs all different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
My brother likes to fall off the bone. I don't like that. I like them with a little mouth pull. But I like cooking my ribs, and this I've done plenty on pellet grills, but I'll pull out the old Weber kettle smoker or the barrel smoker. If you have a barrel, that's awesome. A Gateway barrel smoker cooks them amazing. But if you can use real wood on it, but a Yoder or a Traeger or one of those will work great. I'm more low and slow, and I try not to wrap unless I have to. But wrapping can be very powerful. So what I'm talking about is what I normally do is use the cheapest like French's mustard you can get. I take one of those Drippy's totes, those collapsible totes that we sell.
Mm-hmm.
I take one of those. I peel the liner off of it, right? I clean the ribs up so they look kind of pretty, right? Not gorgeous, but they look edible, right? I'm not trying to win a contest. And I put that mustard on there, and lately I've been using, there's all kinds of different seasonings out there. You can use, there's one called Butt Rub. I've been using Mo Cason seasoning, which is a local guy here in Des Moines. And he was at our grill fest here, and he cooked some unbelievable food when he was here. And he's got a pork seasoning that is just to die for. It's got just a little touch of pepper and heat in it. So I'll put that mustard on there, and I'll hit it up with some of Mo's pork seasoning. And I'll take those ribs, and I'll stick them in a 2-gallon bag, and I'll stick them in the fridge overnight.
Okay.
So, are you taking notes?
I'm going to come back to this. Don't worry about that.
I'll leave them in the fridge overnight. And then normally the ribs that Uncle Gary had, I took out to the grill, and I do a 4 to 5 hour cook. And so I play around with direct and indirect. I only have coals, and I use like good quality charcoal, either a Blues Hog, a Green Egg, Jealous Devil, one of those, like lump charcoals. And I'll get the charcoal going first. I'll get the one side of the grill going, but there's still black charcoal in there that hasn't burned yet. And I'll put them on there at first and really heat them up and get a little bit of a seal on the outside of them, right? And then I play with indirect over the course of the next 3.5 hours. And I'll play with indirect and direct. And about 4 hours in, and I play with the venting a little bit, so the coal's more smolder versus burn. And so if you ask me what temperature it was at, Mike, I do temperature check everything with the thermal pen before it comes off the grill, right?
Yep.
And so I go back and I'm checking it just with that mustard and that seasoning on it, that Mo's pork. I'll hit it with the thermopen, and check the temperature a few times. And I'll grab bone and wiggle bone a little bit, and just looking for color and all that stuff. And about 4 hours in, I'll get the Blues Hog Champions Blend barbecue sauce off, and it comes in a container about this big. It's amazing how long it lasts. And so I'll just drizzle that on there and brush it on there, and I'll play around with direct and indirect a little bit. Well, the ribs I did for Uncle Gary, I wasn't quite happy with the flavor profile. I actually cut an end off of one of them and tasted it. So I caramelized that Blues Hog on there. So the ribs actually turned like red, right? They're beautiful red color. And Uncle Gary's like, this is the most beautiful ribs I've ever seen. And I'm like, I know, right? I know.
All part of the plan.
The head is getting bigger.
That's why it's like, I don't want you to get a big head when you come in. So then I didn't like the flavor profile quite. They're just missing something. So I went in, I grabbed some Sweet and Savory by Blues Hog, and I hit it with some more barbecue sauce just for a little bit, and I just dusted it with that Sweet and Savory, And then I just left it on there. It was about a 5-hour total cook. I pulled it off there. I'm big on resting time, so I hope you guys are too. But I like to rest my ribs. You know, everybody wants them right away. Let them chill for a little bit. So I put them back in that tote, right?
Mm-hmm.
I took them in the house. I left them in that tote for about 15, 20 minutes. Flattened that tote down, and I cut them off, individually cut them, and played with the bone. I had a pair of rubber gloves. Cleaned it all up. So I had this trippy collapsible tote full of these ribs, and they were just beautifully red on the outside. The bark was a little bit of brown, brown, blackish, where it charred a little bit. But when you looked inside where I cut it, there was a smoke ring, 1/4 inch deep. And it was just like, it had enough bite, but not too much bite where you had to fight it. But he said they're the best ribs he's ever had. I did the same thing a couple weeks earlier with Vern and Jerry, and they both went and bought the seasonings I just told you about, the Blues Hog barbecue sauce. So now everybody's cooking the same ribs, so I'm going to have to come up with something. But and if the ribs seem kind of dry, I would wrap them. Wrap them in tin foil, a little butter, a little brown sugar, a little honey, maybe a little spice if you want that.
I feel like you described it so well that I feel like I just ate that. Like I feel like I taste it.
I had lunch before this and I'm hungry again. Yeah. So, but yeah, love that. I appreciate it.
Go ahead.
I said, I appreciate the advice. And like when you were talking about the specific, like sauces and seasonings, like I can't get your Iowa native one down there, but all the other ones you listed off, I was up in the food prep aisle this morning and I know exactly where they're all sitting. So I'm ready to go.
You can get Moe's pork rib. All you have to do is say, "Hey Shane, send me a bottle of that," because we sell it in Des Moines.
Yeah,
there we go.
Can you overnight that?
You're gonna have to overnight that sucker. Yeah,
because be a request for 3 of those coming.
we got like 3 days until this competition, so we gotta go. Oh, that's awesome. Well, Shane, thank you so much for your time, for your advice, and just talking about getting your family involved and the importance of all this food prep stuff. So this is really good stuff.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, hopefully somebody will see it and get their kids in the garden or get their kids in the timber. And I tell you what, they still don't know what kind of nutritional value mushrooms have yet, especially ones that you forage versus. But I don't know. I think getting your hands out and getting them dirty and certainly makes for a happier life. I mean, they did a study not too long ago. I just heard the people that have the happiest occupation in the United States is farmers. And I've been pondering that for a while. And I said, the only reason I can figure is God makes their schedule for the most part, right?
There you go.
So God makes their schedule. So if God makes your schedule, you can't argue with God.
No, pretty tough to argue with that one.
But anybody else, you can be like, they write a crappy schedule, right? But you can't argue with that schedule. So, and I truly believe that most of the people that I know that are generally really happy, I think are farmers or play in the yard and play in the dirt. So.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing a little farming on the side then?
A little backyard farming.
A little.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Shane. Really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And thank everybody for listening. If they want to get any of these seasonings or spices or equipment, make sure to head to your local SCHEELS store or SCHEELS.com and, talk with an expert like Shane.